Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, the show that brings you weekly advice and news at the beginning of every weekend. Introducing first your co-hosts Mac, Mark, Scott, and Landon.
Hey, we are back with another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, coming to you Saturday, July 13th. It is episode 61. Today we're talking about the AFC North. Hopefully everyone's having a good day. How's everyone doing today, Mark? Let's start with yourself.
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. I have just recently, in the last hour, finished a series on Netflix, and I want you two to take one guess at what it was.
Was it about things that are strange?
It's not, Scott, but sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. So you're wrong. It wasn't Stranger Things.
Ooh, that would be my guess. That's the new hotness
It's
on
hot
Netflix
right now. I
now.
get that.
Is it that one with the Rock, the red something?
No.
I just finished watching the OA. Could it be the OA?
It was. Ding, 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 ding.
Hey. Nice. What'd you think? I liked the second season a lot.
Me too, yeah. It was very, metaphysical. There was a couple episodes that I fell asleep during, which is, that's very rare for me to fall asleep during any TV show. But it really, it came back with a pretty mind-blowing final episode, I must say.
I agree. Scotty, what's good, my friend?
Oh, life is good. It's a beautiful Saturday here. Not a cloud in the sky. I've myself been enjoying the classic That 70s Show on Netflix. A little bit of a binge there as well. That is a good show. Red Foreman is one of the best characters ever on television. So not quite
it's a bold statement.
Not quite as deep as the OA, but boy, does he give it to Eric. So that's how I'm doing.
What I like most about today's episode, guys, is that everyone important is present.
Me too. Nothing like my two buddies, Landon and Scott. The only two guys that can
just
rely on
feels
this
right
crazy
this
fantasy
week,
world.
doesn't it?
It does. Unfortunately, we are missing our good friend Mackenzie. He is playing a golf tournament. Aww. Congratulations. He qualified this weekend for the Ontario Amateur and made the weekend, so he made the cut as well.
We miss you, Mac. Don't get it wrong. We miss you, buddy.
So wherever you are and however you may be listening, we thank you for making us part of your day. And you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Everyone else's handles are in the description. I want to remind everyone that we just announced a listener that will be taking part in our listener league. We're still determining the rules, but I think it's going to be a super flex league. Should be a lot of fun. Don't forget to follow us on Patreon. We have tons of new articles coming up, some great stats. Mark just released a really good one about the backfield in Tampa Bay. And I've got one coming up about some big sells in dynasties, top 5 sells in dynasty. So, Scotty, talk to us about the news today, or this week.
Well, we've a bit of an interesting week so far. Josh Jacobs signed his contract, finally. So
that was long overdue, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was. I mean, it's always funny when you get something that drags out that long. It's like, well, of course he's going to do it. What are you not going to sign and play in the NFL? But we've got that. Everybody's favorite Rob Gronkowski is back catching balls from Tom Brady. I wonder how many Dynasty League pickups happened just with that news tidbit today. So
I think he was the highest added player on Sleeper.
Well, maybe those guys are just buds, and that's what they do in their free time, and there's just constantly too much publicity over everything they do.
Well, anyone who's seen the pictures of him recently on the red carpet, Gronk has lost a little bit of muscle this offseason. So if he's expecting to come back and start catching it on the field, it's going to be an interesting turnaround for him. But yep, that's the top buzz article this week.
Marky, what other news we got going on?
Well, a guy that you and I both like, Cortland Sutton, is touted to be the most, well, I should say not the most likely, but a likely candidate to be WR1 in Denver.
Yeah.
So he is someone who can make a big splash in his sophomore year. Definitely didn't make his impression as a rookie, but few really do ever. So, yeah, I think they're going to count a lot on him, especially with a bit of injury bugs over there and Emmanuel Sanders coming back to maybe not the form he once had.
Absolutely, I don't mind that at all. I think Emmanuel Sanders, his career might be done, but we'll see. It came out. Andy Reid said that Damian Williams should be the full-time starter in Kansas City, so that is a valuable asset to have in that offense. So we have a listener question here coming in off of Instagram. A guy that actually is trying to get into our listener league. Steven Furlano on Instagram wants to know which wide receiver do you think could jump into the top 12? So examples from last year were Tyreek Hill, Juju Smith-Schuster, and yeah. So I'll start with Marky. Who would be your most likely candidate as a wide receiver to make that jump, maybe like a tier jump or two, to be in the top 12, and we'll say half-point PPR leagues?
So the biggest no-brainer answer is Odell Beckham Jr. I still think he is,
of course,
the best receiver in the league, and the fact that he didn't make top 12 last year is maybe just a testament to the personnel around him. Everybody is counting on Baker Mayfield to really explode this year as well. Speaking of prominent rookies in their sophomore seasons, I love OBJ this year. I think he'll be right up there in not only top 12, but I'm thinking top 4.
Ooh, I like that. So, do you have a not so obvious guy that you like as well?
A not so obvious? Yeah, I guess maybe like a sleeper wise. I think maybe not necessarily top 12, but maybe like a top, let's say top 20 finish for like James Washington in Pittsburgh. Just if he has, if he has the amount of targets that a WR2 had with Juju Smith-Schuster while Antonio Brown was still on the team, like I think that ball is going to be going to his hands a lot. So that's my sleeper candidate, James Washington.
So he's going in the 11th round. So he's a pretty good value for you if you think he's going to be a top wide receiver.
They do churn out good players in Pittsburgh. There's no arguing that.
For sure. Scotty, who do you like that's currently going outside the top maybe 12 guys in ADP that should be in the top 12 finishers next year?
There's some good candidates out there. One that I think is a relatively safe bet to join the top 12 this year would be T.Y. Hilton in Indy there. He's got all the talent in the world, and although there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense now, it should be just a pretty electric unit. So I definitely think that he could be a strong candidate to make the jump into the top 12 this season.
Yeah, depending on your scoring format, he was a top 12 wide receiver, but guys that finished outside, like Julian Edelman, obviously his strong end of season, absolutely, I think he could be a top 12. Guys on the fringe, I know Keenan Allen, in some scoring formats, he was also a top 12 guy. Brandon Cooks, for me, is a guy I really like. He finished with just over 200 fantasy points in half-point leagues, and I just think that offense, I don't know if Cooper Kupp's going to come back full strength, and I think he's such a young wide receiver. He has a really good chance. I also really like Amari Cooper. So depending on which league you played in, he was outside the top 12. He was dynamite, and I do really think Dak Prescott's going to take that leap forward, and he's going to be the full-time workhorse, wide receiver, and his touchdown upside, everything is just upside for Amari Cooper. So, next question from the same listener. We're going to check over to Fantasy Football Calculator, scroll way down on that list, and I want to know which player has the best value at their current ADP. So to be fair, it could be a first round pick. So it could be like say a David Johnson going to the middle, late first round. He could be a great value. But I for this question, I want to go deeper. I want to help this listener out, a guy that he could draft no matter where he starts in the league. So Scotty, we'll start with you this time. Deep down in leagues, and you cannot pick Delaney Walker. Who do you like in fantasy leagues? That is deep. That is deep down there.
Can't pick my potentially on the PUP for training camp hero. Well, to keep this interesting, you know what? I'm going to bring up wide receiver. We've discussed a little bit. This would certainly be categorized as a sleeper pick because he was probably one of the most hyped players last season, and then, of course, laid quite a dud. But Jamison Crowder, wide receiver for the Jets, he now has a new home there in New York. And, he didn't have a very impressive season with Washington last year. He only played, 9 games, 29 receptions, under 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nothing to write home about. But his season before that was very impressive. And the coaching staff in New York has been pumping his tires for the past few months. So they're saying he's be a massive weapon in their offense, bona fide wide receiver 1. Whether I believe that or not, that he will be, a massive weapon or a top of the line wide receiver 1, I would not go that far. But I think as far as a guy that the shine and the hype has completely fallen off, and justifiably so, I think he could be a good bounce back candidate to maybe at least get you like some high, WR2 returns, maybe low end WR1s.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
So at his ADP, it's a bit of a stretch, but I do think New York's going to be at least an interesting team to watch because you know what? They're probably going to be behind a lot. So
all right.
If you got a wide receiver with Crowder's speed running down the sidelines, maybe up the middle a little bit, I think you could do worse in the deep rounds.
Marky, what are you thinking, my friend?
So I'm not going to go as deep for the pick, but I think this guy is egregiously placed on his ADP. At the 307 spot, we've got Devontae Freeman of the Atlanta Falcons.
I like that.
I really like Devontae, and he's a little bit unfairly treated because of his injury history. I seriously think this is going to be a bounce back year. He had a couple consecutive 1,000-yard seasons in 15-16. And since then, he's still been, he puts up points. When he's healthy, he is a guaranteed, reliable kind of guy. And not only that, but Tevin Coleman is no longer in Atlanta to take away from that. They've got Ito Smith there, who will certainly take a percentage of his work. But I just think you take into consideration that, guys like Marlon Mack, for example, are ahead of him, or like an Aaron Jones, for example, and they have just such little data in their names, right? But to me, Devontae Freeman is someone who's proven in multiple seasons. When he stays healthy, he's a beast of a running back, and he's got an excellent offensive line too. I don't think there's any reason you should pass this guy up if you get to the third round and he's still there. I think he's an early third round, late second rounder even.
Could be a league winner if he stays healthy. High-powered offense, you can't go wrong with the Atlanta Falcons. And finally, I'm going to say Devin Funchess. He's going like mid 12th round. And I know he's always been kind of an ugly player to own, but he's a big body. We know Andrew Luck likes that kind of target. And again, high-powered offense, late-round pick. I like fantasy teams when I look at mock drafts that have Devin Funchess in the late round.
I like that as well, Lando. Love his landing spot in Indy.
So we're going to look at the AFC North today, and we'll start with the Baltimore Ravens. They were the leader in that division last year, and they've got some interesting pieces, but yet still a lot of players that are not getting drafted in fantasy leagues. So they finished 10-6 last year. New sophomore quarterback that's leading the way that doesn't seem to pass the ball very much. So let's talk about Lamar Jackson here, number one. We've talked about him versus Josh Allen. Let's talk about the team in general. How do you guys think of the Baltimore Ravens and where you see them going in 2019? We'll start with Marky, since you're a Lamar Jackson owner in our Dynasty League.
Okay, yeah. I'm glad, actually, that I get to speak on them, and specifically this team. So really happy to have had him on the team, just because he was, his season was given to him on a plate, basically. And it's funny because no one can really fathom Baltimore to be a passing team this season or a threat at all, but they do have some pretty solid personnel at in the receiving core, and I imagine they've been working more on Lamar Jackson's play action, and he's the type of player that can get so many yards on his feet, but I think they probably worked to develop more of his unpredictability. He has the speed of a track star, but at certain points last year, it just seemed like an almost undisciplined amount of running that he was doing. I think this year you're going to see a lot more balance. So I don't know. I like this team for the running attack, but I also like having maybe Mark Andrews or Hayden Hurst. I think his tight ends are going to see a lot of action this year.
I like that a lot, Marky. And going in the 12th round, pretty much no one on that team is getting drafted before the 12th round, which is incredible. Or Mark Ingram going mid fourth round. And Scotty, what are your thoughts on Mark Ingram? When Mac and I did that mock draft, this was a criticism of our pick. Do you like Mark Ingram at all? Are you going to take him as like a running back 2 in any of your leagues, or are you going to kind of stay away from this running game?
I personally will probably be avoiding Mark Ingram unless he falls to me in just kind of a ridiculous
situation. How late are we talking? 5th, 6th round, you'll take Mark Ingram?
Maybe 6th. Justice Hill is there, and don't get me wrong, like Mark Ingram has been, I know you've owned him and on many teams. He has worked out quite well for people. I do think he's, kind of getting into the final few years here of relevance. And with Lamar Jackson being the running quarterback that he is, I just don't know that I trust him to actually put up RB1 numbers consistently. I think there's going to be, as Mark said, I'm sure they're working real hard to turn him into more than a running quarterback, and maybe there will be more of a passing attack. But on the chance that they bring back, 2.0 of what we saw last year, I just don't think he's going to get enough carries really to become that bell cow back that you need to actually put up consistent RB1 numbers. You might have Lamar Jackson put up some massive games with some combined passing and running, but I just don't trust Mark Ingram in this situation to line up enough and run through the tackles to get those points that you need. I think Lamar Jackson's probably the safer bet of the two to pick up the big game week winning stats.
So Baltimore, where do you think Baltimore ranked last year in rush attempts? You throw me a number.
The league?
Wait.
Out of 32?
Of the league last year. Out of 32.
Third.
Middle, back.
That's just backs
Scotty.
out of the backfield?
Yep, backs out of the back. Or rush attempts.
I want to say
including
third.
Quarterback.
Including quarterbacks. Yeah, I would say second.
Yeah, they were number 2.
Behind
That's a good.
Seattle,
Actually,
probably.
I need right behind Seattle, exactly. So
Yeah.
I need to figure out how many actual running plays they devised, because I'd be interested to see where they stand.
So
My
the running
argument
back
is
alone.
mostly if you do a borderline wildcat and Lamar Jackson, runs for, they end up doing 3 yards. So that, he picks up 3 yards. Is that a rush? Because a lot of that offense was based around Lamar Jackson doing things of that nature. But
That's a
does
rush.
that mean that a running back
it's a
is
rush.
going to have a great season? So
let me ask.
my fright.
Let me ask you guys this. You got to grab one wide receiver between Marquise Brown, Willie Snead, Chris Moore, and Miles Boykin of the Baltimore Ravens. Who do you grab? Marquise Brown is the only one with an ADP from Fantasy Football Calculator.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
I would take Marquise Brown. I think that's kind of the consensus, unless you guys have anything else to say. It's at least the draft capital they've put into him. You have to think that.
I totally agree. I think there hasn't really been a wide receiver that has excelled at his size and weight, but I think he could be the exception to the rule. He's so fast. I think everyone in that offense is fast.
I saw him jump over a 6-foot player bag today.
Was that Marquise Brown? I saw that too. No, that was
Marquise
that
Goodwin.
was.
Oh, my bad. I'm
that was
sorry
Goodwin, yeah.
for both of the Marquises listening. I get you guys mixed up.
I just received a tweet from both of them at the same time. They're very upset with you.
Sorry, in that case, I'll take Willie Snead.
Yeah. Obviously, everyone knows my love for Justice Hill. I'm a big fan. I think it's if Lamar Jackson can get his passing game going, he can show himself as a decent passing quarterback and at least be a threat. I think he can do what Cam Newton did, pass out of the backfield like he did to Christian McCaffrey. I think Justice Hill could be kind of the next Alvin Kamara archetype.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man? Bro, I'm out, man. That nigga's tripping.
It's funny that he will be paired up with Mark Ingram, but that's kind of where I see it in the future for them. So, do either of you want? I do also love Mark Andrews. He's a great late round pick. I think he will jump up in ADP as every fantasy analysis seems to love Mark Andrews, including there's notification on Sleeper and everything. So,
and you know what? I think at the same time, Mark Andrews is someone that, personally, I think on a team like this, I don't invest a lot of stock in some of these guys.
Right.
And between Lamar and Mark Andrews, I think those guys that you may be able to sell for more than they're actually worth.
Yeah.
I would argue with Baltimore that one of the main reasons that all these ADPs are so low is everybody on this team, more than anybody in the rest of this conference that we'll be discussing, is directly linked to the arm of Lamar Jackson. And we're going to find out, as Mark said, very quickly, I think we're going to see what he has in store throwing-wise for this season. And if he comes out doing the same sort of, all him offense, then it doesn't matter how good they are. You just are not going to be able to trust them week to week to get enough looks to be a viable option to not potentially lose you a week. I'm saying this as a guy who trotted out quite a few Baltimore wide receivers on flex plays last season, and they almost always let me down.
So where do you guys see Baltimore ending up? Record-wise, I know we're a fantasy football podcast, but the team's success has to do with all their players. If Lamar Jackson succeeds, the whole team succeeds. Where do you see they were 10-6 last year? Do you think they will finish better, worse, the same? Marky, where do you see them? Where do you see them finishing?
I see them finishing third in the division, but still with a respectable 8-8.
8-8. Scotty?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go a little higher. I'm gonna put him at 9-7, just a little higher than 8-8. But yeah, I agree. I agree with Mark. I think they're probably looking at a second or third place finish. I'd be amazed if they finished higher than third.
And I will go just under. I'm gonna go 7-9 for the Ravens. I know their defense is still good, but yeah. Next, we're going to skip over to a pretty much opposite team. Everyone's going high. The Cleveland Browns. expecting big things, a playoff team. Baker Mayfield, number 101 pick last year in the NFL draft. Scotty, what do you think about Baker Mayfield? Do you think this hype is well earned? And what do you think about the Browns? Browns.
Browns. Well, I quite enjoy this because this is one of the first times I think we'll have spent this much time on the fantasy football players of the Cleveland Browns. But the reality is they are loaded with talent, and they are the hyped team of the offseason, but I think justifiably so. Baker Mayfield, he's not my top quarterback, but I must say he's up in that top echelon, and I really think that what's going to play to fantasy owners' strengths there is he is really the opposite of Lamar Jackson. He is a great passer. He's shown his arm
extremely
strength
accurate
and his accuracy. And now he's got Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, David Njoku. Like, he has the weapons, and we know he's not going to try to run it himself. Like, he really is the complete opposite of what we were just discussing. And that excites me as a fantasy owner. So as you go down this list, Nick Chubb, we'll have Kareem Hunt, if he stays out of trouble, at some point worked into that offense. Like, there is a lot of power here. And as a gunslinger goes, those fantasy stats are going to be impressive because he's going to be just dropping back and heaving it to any of these guys. Once Kareem Hunt's back in the mix, you know what? There's going to be some checkdowns, which are going to turn into pretty massive passing yards on top of just OBJ and Landry. So I think the hype is real, and I think it's justifiable. So it'll be interesting to see.
In the 6th round, people are pretty much filling out their main running back, wide receiver, tight end, then going straight to quarterback. Would you be willing to do that strategy, or are you looking to wait on quarterback and get a later QB?
As you probably witnessed in the mock draft, I will jump on quarterbacks if I think the tide is turning.
You like having an elite quarterback, and that's okay. I know you've always been a guy that likes Drew Brees and Kirk Cousins and guys you think that are going to be elite, and that's okay. If you think
it's to me, it's all about the tier drop off. That if I can get an Aaron Rodgers, or in this situation, a Baker Mayfield. And they're kind of I rarely take the first quarterback off the board, but I usually do when I think the tide is turning. I like to get myself an elite option because I find, even a round later, once everybody starts trying to take their quarterbacks, you, instead of having an elite trot them out, essentially plug and play option, you get a lot closer to having to play week to week kind of matchup options. So I like to at least start with a base quarterback I believe in, and now with this lineup around him, Baker Mayfield is part of that bracket.
So Marky, I love the pass catchers in Cleveland. I want you to talk about obviously our man Odell Beckham Jr., but everyone else here too, the tertial pass catchers here.
Well, I think this is just a striking offense in general, no matter what way you look at it. Like, Odell Beckham Jr. is one of the best talents in the league. Jarvis Landry is also a guy who he has gotten a ton of targets in the past 2 years. He's shown himself as a focused and reliable wide receiver, but also he has a lot of chemistry with Odell Beckham Jr., and I'm sure they're going to work really well together. And when they're going to be lined up together, like, that is going to be sick to try and cover that. Antonio Callaway, another piece that is just going to throw defenses for a loop here. And then you get David Njoku in there, who he's been hyped. He hasn't necessarily produced, but this year I think he's going in with a full head, and he recently voiced that he wants to get 20 touchdowns this year. So I don't really think that is going to happen necessarily, but I do think it's within the realm of likelihood that Baker puts up, 33 TDs this year in the air with that.
Easy.
Yeah, with those guys. And that's, this is going to be a powerhouse team. Fantasy-wise, you look at this offense and you just see gold. Defensively, they're also very stacked. So I think on both ends of the ball, they're going to win. They're going to win games. It's going to be really tight between them and the Steelers for who takes the division. But yeah, on paper, I think these guys are the strongest looking team in the division.
Yeah, I've got Baker projected for 31 touchdowns. It's easily in the realm of possibility that it's mid-30s. And I think Jarvis Landry is going to be just fine. I know he's got the name recognition, but I think people are going to see all these guys going early. Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham, Baker Mayfield, David Njoku's a guy I love. And I don't think people should sleep on Njoku. I know there's a ton of pass catchers, but he is still that extremely athletic tight end. He's going to be a red zone target. I think he could easily get targets between the 20s as well. So we have him ranked pretty far down, but I think he has the potential. If he slips into the 9th, 10th round, I think it's a no-brainer for Njoku to be an every week at least easily streamer in good matchups this year.
Easily, so yeah. He's not going. I don't think David Njoku is going to find himself on waiver wires anywhere close to the start of this season. But if people lose faith or if people are having to lose the season, that might be the guy to scoop from them.
For sure. And like a toss in a trade if he has a bad week one.
How do you got them going? What's their record going to be this year, Scott?
Oh, Scotty, what do you think?
Ooh, that's... You know what? I'm going to buy in. I could see them going as high as maybe 12 wins.
12 wins? I love it. I like that a lot.
You know what? I think it's finally time to maybe buy in on the Browns. They have all this talent, and football is football. You know, one injury to OBJ or an injury to Baker Mayfield, and but like Mark said, their defense is stout. So we knew that their defense was good. It was really when they made that trade for OBJ and then kind of picking up the talent with Kareem Hunt to go with Chubb there. I could really see them actually having a very successful season. I've never said this before, but I could forecast them for maybe something like a 12-4 season.
I would say I've got them at about 10-6. Marky, what do you think?
Same here, Lando. 10-6. I mean, I love Scott's boldness here, but I am not. I guess I'm not ballsy enough to say that they're going to jump to be a 12-win team. But just because I said that, Scott, I sure hope they do.
Boy, would it be fun for that city if they did.
Cincinnati Bengals. They were the dumpster of the division, but last year they produced a lot of good fantasy players. 2 years ago, I argued that they produced such poor numbers per snap run that they had to have some positive regression. Joe Mixon, Andy Dalton, AJ Green. I didn't predict the Tyler Boyd. I'll take an L on that, but I still thought their team would be much better than they were, and I was right. So Andy Dalton, I believe, is a streamer. He could be just an absolute fine quarterback. He's got a lot of weapons. He's a quarterback you feel okay playing on DraftKings in really good matchups, but he's pretty much going undrafted. So pick him up maybe week 3 or 4. I could check the schedule while these guys are talking about it. But it's the kind of guy that if you're in a pinch in a bye week, I think Andy Dalton's going to be just fine. And they might move on from him next year if they still finish poorly in this division. But Andy Dalton's fine. Scotty, what do you think about the running backs here? Or you know what? I'll get Marky to talk about the running backs. You can talk about the pass catcher Scoots.
Joe Mixon is guaranteed points. If you got him on a team, you should be happy. I think he's got to be one of the most promising backs in the league right now, sitting at the ADP of, late first round, 112, let's call it. But we have him ranked as the 8th RB, and I think he's so consistent that he's gonna come out of the gate and promise those owners, 90 to 120 yard type games, maybe a touchdown, usually a touchdown, I should say. And yeah, if you got Joe Mixon on your team, you should be happy because he's going to get the ball a lot, and he's good. Giovanni Bernard, on the other hand, someone who is not going drafted these days because he just simply, his time in the sun has come and gone. And there's a couple interesting rookie names on this team, but just looking at it, I don't think like Travion Williams, for example, will really tap into Joe Mixon's feed because he seems to be on the field for so many of those downs, and rightly so. He's a reliable back, and I really think he has that potential to be, a top 7, top 8 running back.
Absolutely. Booker right now, week 5, Andy Dalton, they play the Cardinals. He will be a quarterback 1. Scotty, what do you think about AJ Green, Tyler Boyd? Do you think AJ Green has one more season left in him? Or do you think it's the torch is going to be passed to a Tyler Boyd, John Ross, maybe if Tyler Eifert manages to stay healthy for a season?
AJ Green has a lot of the same skills and talents that really make it hard to predict that, much like with Julio Jones, where a lot of us
very much so
had to go out and kind of make our declaration of whether he'd have one more good year or whether he was on the decline. And as anyone who made that bold claim last season that, Julio has had his time and it's downhill from here, well, we all know how that played out, and everybody's left eating crow. So I am not going to make the bold declaration that AJ Green's time is over. I think he will still be an elite weapon this season. I think he has at least one more year. Based on what I saw last year, I did not see him slow down at all. When he
got hurt.
Well, but that's the thing, right? When healthy, he was still that absolute threat that could just dominate a game and take over and put up just unholy numbers. And injuries happen and they're unfortunate, and as they're getting up there in age, it could have further repercussions. But really, until I see some regression that's not based on injury, that's not him just out of the game, I'm not going to sit there and say AJ Green's time is over, because I still think he is the absolute leader in the wide receiver room there. And there's some young guys there with potential, but I see we've got AJ Green ranked as WR 12 and Tyler Boyd at WR 19. But as far as who Dalton's going to be looking for when they're all healthy, I think AJ Green's just going to get the lion's share because he commands that whole team, and Dalton's fighting kind of for his career at this point.
So based on the team being fairly probably poor, and we'll find out where we think they're going to finish shortly, do you take maybe 2 guys out of the offense? You only take Mixon and Green and stay away from Boyd because he's getting drafted pretty high because he had a really good season last year, especially when AJ Green was not in the lineup.
I mean, that's the.
Or would you take a flyer on Boyd because he was pretty consistent? He was a good wide receiver last year. They're going to throw the ball a lot because their team is bad and likely behind.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You could do a lot worse than Tyler Boyd. And as we said, if AJ Green gets injured again, which a guy who has the amount of volume that AJ Green does, there's always, I would argue, a higher percentage chance that he's going to get injured. Because anyone who's thrown at that much, there's just a lot of chance for a hit to go the wrong way, non-contact injuries, any of that stuff. And Boyd did prove that he is a real gamer when AJ Green is not in the game. So I wouldn't necessarily call him a handcuff. I think he's a very skilled wide receiver, but I think to actually put up the type of numbers that people are going to be hoping for, he'll probably need AJ off the field for at least a portion of the season to kind of really come into his own like he started to last season. But a late round flyer, or not even so late, you could do a lot worse than having Tyler Boyd on your roster.
No, yeah, he's in that ugly little middle round of the drafts. Last yes or no question of both of you: is Tyler Eifert worth a flyer in your last round of your fantasy football drafts?
If you think he can stay healthy, if deep in
Yes
your
or no?
soul you believe that he is going to stay healthy this season, then sure. I mean, the name is always attractive. You know, you always see him there every season, and you think maybe this is the year I'm taking him, and then he goes down. And
Marky,
gonna do this again.
Well, I don't know. Like this duo is like historically good. Like Dalton and Eifert are pretty sick together as a combo. Let's say, so I've looked this up. On 183 attempts, there has been 138 receptions, 20 TDs, and 1,665 yards as a duo. Damn! Like, those numbers are pretty outrageous. And I think if Andy Dalton wants to keep his job as a starting quarterback, he is going to need Tyler Eifert in a big way.
Cool. I like it. Where do you think the Bengals are finishing this year?
I got him at 6-10.
Same thing. All right, Scotty?
Yeah, 6-10 sounds about right for this squad.
Hey, we did a thing.
Yeah,
Friendship.
I'm gonna go like 4-12. I'm gonna go worse than last year.
But they also don't forget there is a new head coach there with Zach Taylor coming over from the Rams. And we've also got an offensive line that at least was given a certain amount of effort to improve in the offseason. So I think those things are going to affect the team as well. And you may see, if there's anything like Sean McVay to bestow upon the Ravens team, you might see a little more high risk, high reward type plays.
I like that. I like that for their fantasy output. All right, finally, we'll try to finish up the Steelers fairly quick. So, Big Ben finished really great last year. Top end quarterback, one of his best finishes in the NFL. Now, he did have the best wide receiver in the game, Antonio Brown, to throw to. Do you think he is getting sorely underdrafted, being in the 11th round, mid 11th round? He's even ranked in our rankings as the 18th overall quarterback. What do you think about Big Ben and this team in general? Scotty, give me your first impressions here.
Pittsburgh's an interesting story going into this season. I mean, they were an interesting story last year because they were on Lev Bell watch for the entire season pretty much.
And they tied the first game of the season against the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been just chaos in the locker room to deal with, that circus all season long. So I find it interesting this year because I feel like we might be coming to a bit of a changing of the guard with Antonio Brown being traded out. Juju's now undeniably the top wide receiver in that offense. And Ben had a great statistical season last year. But obviously their performance on the field and their win-loss record is not what they were hoping for. So their overall success was not there. For me, I find that interesting because there's two ways in my head this goes. Either Pittsburgh has stability now. They know James Conner's their running back. Juju now, loves being in Pittsburgh. He is their go-to wide receiver. And maybe they just gel better as a unit without the Lev Bell chaos surrounding them. And if that, if they can bring it all together, maybe they pull like a 10-6 season, I think. The other way that this goes in my mind is James Conner for a full season is not who Pittsburgh hopes he is. And, he can't be that dynamic back that Lev Bell was. And Juju can't replicate what they lost with Antonio Brown. And I feel like if Ben then comes out and starts to show his age, which at a certain point he very well may, I do think things could start going sideways. And we could see a finish closer to an 8 or 8 or even lower. So I think this really could be a team of of two potential paths here, and I'm interested to see which way it goes.
Interesting. So, Marky, do you think James Conner can be the real deal for a full season, being an RB1? He's getting drafted right at that turn pick. So you can get Joe Mixon and James Conner on your team if you want to, which should be a pretty good 1-2 punch at running back. Or do you think they actually do something they haven't done in a very long time or ever before and start to make this team, this backfield, a committee? With Jalen Samuels doing pretty well, they drafted Benny Snell Jr. Do you think it could be a committee, or do you think James Conner can just be that lone back and finish as an RB1?
James Conner is...
What's your risk factor, I guess?
think James Conner...
Medium, high?
He's a de facto running back 1 after last season. I think he'd be crazy to take away carries from a guy like this who was super clutch in the moments where he needed to be clutch. This team in general, they're not a losing team. It's been 16 years since their last losing season back in 2003. And frankly, they do it by having such a good balance of pass to rush. And James Conner was, the reason that they stayed in the green last year. And I think guys like Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell Jr., they're just, maybe they're not, I don't think they're the type of players to be able to threaten or compromise his role in the offense. Yes, they'll take the ball and help out, but I think James Conner is still in for a solid 1,000-yard minimum season and a good 8 to 10 touchdowns. That's my take.
Yeah, so we currently have them exactly that. 1,010 rushing yards with 10 touchdowns.
Well, there
so you're bang on with your little projection there, and that's what we got too. So Scotty, obviously Juju's the man. The star is real. It's shining bright with Juju. He's going as the wide receiver 6 at around that turn pick. What do you think about Juju and the pass catchers in Pittsburgh?
I think Juju's the real deal. I think he's
full season as the wide receiver 1 on that team. He can do it.
Yeah, I think he's coming into a situation. Not to say it's necessarily going to be like Devontae Adams taking over and emerging instead of being the young up and comer and just taking the whole team.
But it could be, couldn't it?
But I'm not saying it's exactly the same. But once again, you've got one of the historically great quarterbacks in Ben Roethlisberger, and now with Antonio Brown there in Oakland, it feels like a similar type of situation where he may very well come in and just take over that receiving game, and if that's the case, then his ADP, I really think, it's definitely at best fair, at worst fair.
There's a world where he could easily fit. He could finish in front of Devontae Adams. It just basically is all about touchdowns.
Yep.
And if James Conner doesn't run on the touchdowns, and that's essentially the difference, is it not?
I would argue that I think James Conner is probably more of a threat in the run game than what Green Bay is rolling out right now, but that might just be my personal opinion on it. So I think Devontae Adams will have more targets than Juju just based on the amount of carries James Conner is probably going to get. But once again, that might just be my bias, as Devontae Adams is just a machine for targets.
So it may surprise you a little bit if you were to look into it. Juju Smith-Schuster had 7 touchdowns last year, but he had an enormous amount of red zone targets, and the amount of touchdown catches that he missed last year, it could have shot his fantasy total like through the ceiling if he had caught more passes in the end zone than he did. So I think that trend is going to continue, and I think for that reason alone, he's going to take that number 7 touchdowns and turn it into a dozen minimum.
Yeah, I like it. Do you take a flyer on any of these other wide receivers? I know you like James Washington. What about Dante Moncrief? He was kind of a guy who used to be Andrew Luck's kind of go-to red zone guy, big-bodied. He seems to be getting some pretty good praise, but he's not getting drafted. Do either of you want to touch Dante Moncrief or stay away?
If you got a space on your roster, I think someone like that, anyone on the Pittsburgh offense, you may as well keep. If he's number 1, 2, or 3 in his position, I think he's worth keeping because that offense puts up points.
Yeah, I would agree. I would keep an eye on the depth charts and training camp, and whoever's going to line up across from opposite Juju. That's never a bad option in that offense because they'll be on the field just as much as him.
There you go. And Vance has skyrocketed up fantasy draft boards and is going like late 7th round. Do you take him there? Or are you just going to pass and get a guy like Mark Andrews a little bit later?
I would take a chance on Vance McDonald. He once again fully healthy, I think he's a fine receiving option. And Ben likes to go to his tight end. Or if you look at his career, he always seems to have a favorite tight end that he likes to try to get it to. I don't know if he'll put up tight end 1 numbers for sure, but I would at least take a shot at him.
Yeah, we've got him ranked as this tight end 13. Marky, are you a fan of Vance? Are you going to do the Vance dance or nah?
No, he made too many of my Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary members look like fools last year. So I hate him, and I'm never going to draft him.
All right, let's make it quick. We're going to wrap things up. Scotty, what's the record for the Steelers this year?
You know what? I'm gonna go. I'll go a bit of doubt. I'll go 10-6.
10-6. Marky.
I think they're gonna go 9-2-4. They're gonna tie 4 games. No, I think it's gonna be.
I was waiting.
I think it's
for
gonna
that.
be a 9-7 season for them.
Cool. I like it. I'm gonna go 8-8. They're gonna disappoint this year.
All right.
All right, guys. Let's wrap it up. This was a lot of fun. We miss you, Mackie. I hope you had a good weekend. And thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed a little overview, like a broad stroke of the AFC North. And if you have any questions, concerns, make sure to tweet us, SMS_fantasy. Send us on Instagram at the same handle. All right, guys. Any final words for the listeners today?
3 weeks until the preseason starts.
Let's go.
8 weeks until real football. Ooh, it's coming.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Enjoy your Saturday.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Snap.